guitar people, welcome to Have Guitar Will Travel, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine. With your host, me, James Patrick Regan, otherwise known as Jimmy from the Deadlies, and today I'm speaking with guitarist and banjo player Ed Sweeney. In our conversation, Ed tells us about his Christmas album, Inside Fezziwigs, The Spirit of Christmas Past, my personal favorite Christmas album. Ed has generously offered it for free as a download on his website, edsweeneymusic.com, through the end of the year. I'm sure you'll love it. Ed talks about his home life in Rhode Island, growing up in Lexington, Kentucky, and his early musical education, as well as the many moves his family made while he's growing up. Ed discusses taking guitar lessons from the blind blues singer Paul Pena and becoming Providence College's first ever music major. Ed tells us about the instrument he plays, 6-string and 12-string guitars, 5-string banjo, and fretless banjo, and the companies and people who made those instruments. Ed tells us about how he hooked up with documentarian Ken Burns and with Disney, which is quite remarkable. Ed tells us about spending 14 years as finance director for Yo-Yo Ma's Silk Road project. And Ed discusses who he's listening to right now and who inspires him. Finally, Ed talks about playing live shows and teaching lessons. You can find out all you'd like to know about Ed at his website, edsweeneymusic.com. That's edsweeneymusic.com. And he's active on Facebook. Please subscribe, like, comment, share, and most of all, review this podcast. I'd really appreciate it. And please support Vintage Guitar Magazine and all the wonderful things they do for us guitar players, because they do so many wonderful things for us guitar players. Here's my friend Ed. Hi there, Ed. Are you here?
I'm here.
How are you, sir?
I'm fine. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm very proud to meet you.
So am I. Now, where in you live in Northern California?
I do. I live in Napa.
Oh, okay.
And whereabouts are you?
Cumberland, Rhode Island.
Cumberland, Rhode Island.
Yes.
Rhode Island's a very big state. So whereabouts is that in Rhode Island?
It's in the northern corner, right on, I can spit to Massachusetts.
Okay.
But Rhode Island, when you say it's a big state, you can't drive an hour in any direction and still be in Rhode Island.
When I was going to Berklee School of Music, I had the pleasure of going to Rhode Island on the coast a couple times.
So
it was beautiful.
Yeah, my wife and I, we lived in Morgan Hill.
Oh, really?
Down by San Jose.
Sure.
And then Inside Fezziwigs was originally on Kicking Mule Records.
Yeah.
Out in Alder Point.
Yeah. Yep.
You know that Ed Henson passed recently. He was the owner of Kicking Mule.
Oh, really? I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he passed this past spring.
Wow.
He got out of the music business, and for the past 10 years, he's been one of the leading attorneys for marijuana laws.
Oh, really?
And defending people growing marijuana and getting their permits up in Northern California.
Sure. Probably in Humboldt and Mendocino counties.
You got it.
And actually, that now in Montague and out in the high desert as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of places. But unfortunately, none of them are doing well because of all the restrictions and everything. So that whole thing is a big mess. But anyway, I digress. Before we get any further, the Inside Fezziwigs, what was the inspiration for making that album?
I've always loved the story A Christmas Carol.
Yep.
Okay. Fezziwigs, is where Scrooge apprenticed.
Sure. Yeah.
So that just led me down an idea of what would a dance party at that time, what would they be humming or singing along to and dancing to? And then it sort of, just went off on that. So
yeah, exactly. At that time, there was probably 3 Christmas Carol movies out. Did you use any of the movies for inspiration as to what songs were being played?
Not for what songs, but for style.
Okay.
George C. Scott.
Okay.
So a friend of mine actually has a copy of the 90-minute reading Charles Dickens used to read A Christmas Carol every year. And he would be paid to go to do this. Mm-hmm. And originally started off as almost a 5 to 6 hour reading.
Wow.
And so finally, he boiled it down to 90 minutes.
Oh, my goodness.
And a friend of mine had a copy signed by his son. So I read it, and the George C. Scott production follows that very closely.
Okay.
But it was just interesting to read this very small book.
Sure.
As the inspiration. That was what Charles Dickens made his public reading, Christmas Carol.
Yeah. I don't have the liner notes in front of me. The initial song, the first song, is that one of your own compositions?
Oh, none of them. I didn't compose any of them.
Okay.
So that's Gloucestershire Wassail. And so I just treated it as a dance tune.
Yeah.
Of the time.
Yeah. You did a great job. I told you this before, but it's definitely my favorite Christmas record. And the second one would be the more contemporary version that you released.
Oh, it's Christmas Time in the City.
Yes, exactly. And
that's the music I grew up with because my dad was in radio.
Okay.
From when I was 4 to when I was 10. Before I was born, my dad was a sports broadcaster.
Okay.
And I don't know if this means anything to you or not.
Sure it does.
So he used to broadcast the college games that had Bob Cousy at Holy Cross and Tommy Heinz at Holy Cross. And when I was 4 to when I was 10, he owned WLAP in Lexington, Kentucky, and he was the voice of the Kentucky Wildcats.
Okay.
So, basketball was just in my blood. And so being an AM station, when AM stations were the main music stations.
Absolutely, yes.
We had all the contemporary Christmas music.
And
I really loved those melodies too. So so as was Fezziwigs, I stayed very traditional.
Yep.
Christmas Time in the City, I just went, no, now I'm going to do what I personally grew up with.
Yep, exactly.
And, Johnny Mathis singing Silver Bells and all these other things. And then there's some side stories of the person who on those 2 recordings who played clarinet and oboe was a man named John Swoboda, who was a professor of mine at PC.
Okay.
Now, at Providence College, I was the first music major ever. So I got away with murder. But, this was the 70s, and it got pushed through, and Father Haller wanted to start a department, and I had to go figure out a curriculum and teachers and everything. But they had, by my senior year, 4 teachers, and John Swoboda was one of them. And universities have this thing of you either publish or you're out. He was a jazz symphonic musician.
Okay.
That was his life. And he could double on all woodwinds.
Okay.
So he used to use my recordings. These 2 recordings he was on as unpublished. And they were like, okay. And he's a graduate, so it was really funny.
That's great. So we've talked about your dad being in radio, but when did you pick up instruments for the first time?
High school. I don't know do you know who Paul Pena was?
I don't off the top of my head. I did read your bio, so I have an idea.
Well, he was a blind blues guitarist.
Okay.
He was a student at Clark University, had a really hot band at the time.
Okay.
And from watching him play, I wanted to learn how to play guitar.
Okay.
Now, he got signed to Capitol Records. He went off and he wound up in the Bay Area. And he wrote the song Jet Airliner, which the Steve band.
Yeah, of course.
Paul had a tough life, but he learned Tubian throat singing from shortwave radio.
Oh, my goodness.
And there's quite a bit of a Tubian population in the Bay Area.
Okay.
So they brought over the grand singer, and Paul sang for him, and they invited him to compete in throat singing.
Wow.
In tuba, and in the West Coast, there were these filmmakers who followed him, and they made a documentary of it, which almost was nominated for an Academy.
Okay.
Called Gaines Blues.
Okay.
And that's Paul doing that. And from that, I reconnected with him a short time before he died from that movie.
Right on. That's great.
But some of Paul's friends were Bonnie Raitt and B.B. King and John Lee Hooker and all of them. They all knew each other. Freebo.
Yeah. You mentioned that, so your dad's radio station was in Lexington, Kentucky?
Yeah.
Did you move around the country a lot when you were young?
By the time I was 15, I lived in about 7 or 8 states.
Wow. Okay.
So he sold Lexington and we moved to Sanford, Maine, and then he started going into a different business.
Okay.
And so we then moved from Sanford, Maine to Worcester, Massachusetts, and I went to high school in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, college at Providence College.
Sure.
But before we moved to Kentucky, I was born in a little town called Ware, Massachusetts. We lived in Concord, New Hampshire, Athol, Massachusetts,
Wow.
Westerly, Rhode Island, and Staten Island, New York.
Wow.
All before the age of 4.
Wow. Oh, my goodness.
And then we moved to Kentucky, and I was there from 4 to 10, and then it was another move every year.
Wow. Yeah.
For a few years.
Yeah. And this is all because of your father's work?
Yeah.
You were exposed to a lot of different cultures, I'm sure, and living in each one of these areas.
I think just times. It's very difficult in 2024 to realize that in Lexington, Kentucky, my mom was born and raised in Ireland.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And so she immigrated to this country right after World War II.
Okay.
My dad raised, very full Roman Catholic. Uh-huh. But in Lexington, Kentucky, we were a minority.
Sure.
And you knew it.
Okay.
So, the Catholics did go to the Catholic schools.
Okay.
They didn't go to the public schools.
Yep.
And just many other things. And, in 1960, when John Kennedy was running for president, one of the things was you cannot have a Catholic as president.
Oh, my goodness.
It was an issue.
Yeah.
It was a big issue, so you've gotten to see, those changes. You've got to see the changes of racism, of many different things, going from the Northeast type of racism, which existed, down to the Midwest South.
Yeah.
And they were all different.
Yeah.
But in some ways, I consider how I treat people and talk to people and everything. Mm-hmm. I have much more Midwest values.
Okay.
Than any other region.
Sure.
And then, and what I mean by that is, as a kid, I remember the 3 front lawns of the neighbors' houses became our football field.
Wow.
There were no fences, there was nothing, and that's where the kids played, and everyone was like, yep, from house to house to house to house.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And so when Tracy and I were raising our boys, our house was the hangout.
Okay, that's fantastic. So when you started playing in high school, what was your instrument?
The beginning serious instrument was guitar.
Okay.
I played in a jug band where I used to play basketball and other funny instruments in high school.
Yeah.
I went to an all-boys high school run by Severian Brothers. Uh-huh. It was different. But then I started learning guitar from Paul.
Okay.
And from that, and started performing as a solo performer then. After a few months.
What kind of guitar were you playing when you first started? Do you remember?
A harmony.
A harmony, okay. Very good.
Yep.
From the Sears catalog or outside of the...
I found it in a music store, and then I saved up my money and worked, and finally got what I thought was a big deal, a Harmony Sovereign.
Oh, yeah, of course. That is a big deal. Those are very sought after now.
Yes. Then I got introduced to Martins, and so then I saved up and had a D25, D28, and then finally a D35.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't until when I was in Providence, I went to a music store called Providence Guitar and Banjo, run by Michael Allison. Uh-huh. And Michael looked at my playing and goes, "You have the wrong guitar for you." And he had a 0028 on the wall.
Okay.
Which I still have.
Oh, right on.
And he's like, "This is the guitar that fits your style of playing." And I started understanding that different guitars are really for different styles of playing.
Sure. Yes, very much so. Especially those Martin.
Yes. And then Michael Allison was also a well-known banjo builder. My first banjo was one he had taken from a banjo mandolin rim, and he built a 5-string neck on it.
Wow.
Very heavy, until finally he built the long neck I have now.
Okay.
Back in 1980.
And with banjo, were you self-taught, or were you taking lessons with that?
I took half and half. Because I was working for a music major, I had to find teachers.
Yeah.
But I was interested in steel string guitar, not classical guitar. And so I found one teacher in Providence who taught me as far as he could, because he taught classical guitar at a college. And then but he'd taken steel string from a man named Tony Salatan up in Boston.
Okay.
Tony, very few people know the name, but he's the person who found the song Michael, Row Your Boat Ashore.
Really?
And Kumbaya.
Oh,
yes.
my goodness.
And really found these old songs and old hymnals and knew all the people who collected folk songs.
Sure.
And so I went up to study guitar with Tony.
Uh-huh.
And Tony, he studied with both Pete Seeger and Leonard Bernstein.
Wow. Oh, my goodness.
He had his master's in music from Harvard.
Wow.
And he was public television's first music education program nationwide.
Wow. Oh, my goodness.
So, and from Tony, I learned a lot of how to teach myself to get much more disciplined.
Uh-huh.
You know, yes, I could hear and play, and then as you get exposed to more, you pick up more tricks.
Yeah.
And then he really slowed me down. And what I mean by discipline is he would play right along with me.
Okay.
It was humbling.
Yeah.
Good advice and everything. And he felt that if you couldn't play something, if you could play something fast but couldn't play it slow, you really didn't know it.
Yeah.
Okay. So he would force me to play slow to really milk everything.
Sure.
From that.
Yeah.
But through Tony, I met Eric Schoenberg. Through Tony, I met Michael Cooney.
Yeah.
I met all these other people.
Yeah.
Frank and Jeff Warner, Ann and Frank Warner, who were collectors who found He's Got the Whole Wide World in His Hands and Lay Down Your Head, Tom Dooley. They're the people who collected those songs.
Wow.
And from them, I've got to meet other people and find out who was keeping this music and had enough chutzpah to go meet them.
Yep. That's great. How did the fretless banjo come about?
Ooh, that's first fretless banjo I ever heard was some recordings of Frank Prophet of Reese, North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
And then I watched Michael Cooney play a fretless banjo and just loved the sound of it.
Okay.
For certain things, its sound can't be matched.
Okay.
My dear friend Michael Allison had all these parts from 1890, 1900. So he put together a fretless banjo for me of this skin rim and this neck, that he planed smooth because it was so small, it could never be used on anything else. And
yeah.
So became very self-taught on fretless.
And while you were learning, did you have a lot of friends?
Oh, fretless is a lot more quiet than regular banjo.
Okay.
Yeah, but I know what you mean because as a you're a musician yourself. And,
yes, I am.
and you know that sometimes you can really get lost in practicing like 7 notes in a row.
Sure.
And just going over and over, and you're hearing the differences, and everyone else around you is like, are you trying to kill me? What's going on here? So I'm aware of that. But fretless is a much quieter instrument.
Okay, very good. How did you get hooked up with Ken Burns?
By accident.
Okay.
I did a recording for North Star Records called American Sampler.
Okay.
And he wanted to use that on a couple of his things. So all of a sudden I found that North Star had licensed some of American Sampler to him.
Oh, wow.
Because American Sampler is nothing but traditional American music from the Revolutionary War to World War I.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Which is, yeah. And I had so much fun doing it. And then a lot of times when I record, I want to surround myself by, one, musicians who are better than me and friends.
Yeah, of course.
And so when I arrange, it's sort of, I'll have the basic piece and then I'll make spaces. And I tell them, you don't have to do what I do. I'm going to play behind you. That's all I want to do. I don't want to show off. I want you to play. And I think that gives, at times, a lot more dynamics.
Sure.
I'm not one of those who says, let's write out a chart and you play this note for note. I've never been that way.
Yeah. Do you read? You must read if you...
Yes. I can read. I don't read a lot. I use my ears mostly.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I like hearing... I'm always amazed how one person can take a song and 8 other people can do it differently.
Yeah.
To me, that's so much fun.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. I should ask you how you got hooked up with Disney.
Oh, wow. Okay, in the 1980s, I had done American Sampler and the 2 Christmas titles.
Okay.
And I sent them to Disney as, what the heck?
Yeah.
You know, if I send you something, so what I did is I actually sent them to the CEO of Disney.
Wow. To Michael Eisner at the time, or who?
Michael Eisner.
Okay.
I sent him certified mail to Michael Eisner because I figured 2 things. First of all, I might get his signature on something because I'm a Disney fan.
Yeah, of course.
And 2, if Michael Eisner, if your boss looks at you and says, I want you to listen to this, you're going to listen to it. But if someone way down the bottom goes, I think this is cool, it's like, yeah, whatever.
I'll get to it sometime.
I'll get to it.
Yeah.
Well, to my surprise, I got about a half dozen letters from people at Disney who said, Michael Eisner said for us to listen, we love this.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And they were encouraging, and quite a few were saying, we don't have any use for this right now, but you really weren't offering it to us, were you? And I got to befriend a lot of people.
Right on.
At Disney. It wasn't until years later I found out that they had been paying the publishing royalties, the pros, on what they used in the parks. A few years ago, I get this letter through my website. And this young woman said, I know you know that Disney Tokyo and Disney Paris is using this recordings, but did you know that this recording was in the opening of Frontierland from 1992 to 2012?
Wow.
And I was going, no. And she goes, do you know that one of the pieces is on their collection of the music of Disney?
Wow.
It's not a credit to you. And I said, I didn't know that. So I wrote, and I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, that means millions of people have heard me playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Damn.
Absolutely.
So
there couldn't be a wider audience.
Correct. And, they don't know it's me, but they heard something I did.
Yeah, of course.
But I wrote to Disney, and I said, because I know how this happens, you get flooded with stuff. And they came back, and they said, you're right, we should have contacted you. It slipped through the cracks. Let's sign you to a contract, and we'll take care of it. And they did.
Oh, right on.
Right, within 30 days.
Oh, my goodness.
And I've had Christmas things licensed to Sony and to Warner, and it's almost adversarial.
Yeah.
We'll pay you in 90 days. Yeah, sure. 6 months later, something. But they're big companies, and I realize how small I am. But Disney, no, within 30 days, everything done.
Wow.
Couldn't be people on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever speak with Stan Freese?
No. From 2005 to 2019, I worked for the Silk Road Project.
Yeah. Yes.
Yo-Yo Ma's Silk Road Project, and that was 60 to 80 hours a week.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was a whole different world.
Yes, exactly. And so for the Silk Road Project director?
Yeah, I was the operations and finance director.
But did you play at all for this? Or no?
No.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no, I had always understood the business of music.
Yeah.
And everything. And I got to meet some people from all over the world.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I didn't get to travel because I was that stay-at-home person. Something goes wrong, who you call?
Yeah.
So when they were on tour, it would be unusual for me to get something at 2 a.m. because it's 2 p.m. in China where they are.
Yeah.
And you're sort of like, okay, I'll deal with it.
Yeah. Are there guitarists that you listen to now? Or I should ask you just, what are you listening to right now?
I still listen to a lot of Eric Schoenberg.
Okay.
He's one of my all-time favorite guitarists.
From Schoenberg Guitars here in Tiburon?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. In Tiburon. For years, he was one of the owners of the Music Emporium in Boston.
Oh,
he was on the for years.
Yeah.
But Eric is one of my all-time favorite guitarists.
Okay, great.
To listen to.
Yeah.
Pierre Ban-Suzanne.
Yeah.
I enjoy a great deal.
Yeah.
I'm blanking out. I got to meet him, Martin
Simpson?
Yes. I got to meet Martin Simpson and spent a week around him and just love how he approaches everything.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Martin's a great guy.
He really is.
Yeah. Well, actually, Eric is a great guy too. I don't think I've met Pierre, but these people are just fantastic people.
Yes, and they're encouraging, and they don't put people down.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Richard Thompson's a nice guy.
Oh yeah, of course.
You know, and so all these different people. So it gets a little very Duck Baker, who now lives in England.
Yeah, Duck Baker. About the same time I was exposed to your music, it was when I was exposed to Duck Baker as well. And he's an amazing guitar player also. Ed
Denson, who owned Kicking Mule Records, thought Duck Baker was the best guitarist for a variety of styles that he knew.
Yeah.
Because Duck could play an amazing number of styles and really play it. You know, I know Paul Jeremiah, even though, you know, he can't play anymore.
Yeah.
You know, great country blues guitarist.
Sure.
And then in terms of banjo, I love listening to Kathy Fink. Jeff Davis, another great old-timey player.
Yep.
Ken Perlman. So whenever they have anything out new, it's like, oh, what you doing?
Exactly. Playing live. Right now, I on your calendar, it just had a couple, maybe a date or two in March.
I went through some interesting times. A year ago, March, I had a triple bypass, a new heart valve installed.
Oh, wow. Oh, boy.
And I'm lucky I did not have a heart attack or a stroke.
Yeah.
But it meant that I actually had to wait 5 months for surgery.
Wow.
You know, it was sort of a surprise.
Yeah.
So I canceled everything and just sort of sat out and recovered. And now, so went through that, released a Sunday drive after getting well enough.
Yeah.
And I would suggest to people that if you're working on a recording, don't have heart surgery in the middle of it. Trust me. Just trust me on this one. I only play out part-time these days. Tracy and I are grandparents, so we like to see our grandchildren.
Sure.
Tracy's mom lives in Fresno. She's in her late 80s, so we go to check in on her.
Wow. That must be a hell of a flight.
Yes. Well, you know, like I told you, we lived in Morgan Hill.
Yeah.
So we'll fly into San Jose.
Yep.
And then drive to Fresno, which is an easy drive.
Yeah.
And then we'll go down to Monterey.
Okay.
We have friends and know the area, and then fly back. So probably, you know, come this fall, I'll be able to start planning on touring more. But, you know, I have 2 grandchildren's birthdays to go to, so that's 2 trips to North Carolina.
Okay. Before your heart surgery, how often were you playing? How about if we say pre-COVID, what were you doing?
Ooh, that's a good line. Yeah. That's a good one. Pre-COVID, well, from 2005 to 2019, I was at Silk Road. And we were working.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That number of hours.
Yeah.
I was not playing much. You know, I might only do a half dozen times a year. Before Silk Road, I would be doing, you know, 50 to 100 shows a year.
Wow. Okay. That's significant.
You know, it's sort of, it all depends, because one of the choices Tracy and I made after both boys were born is I would back off the road because childcare in this country is incredibly expensive.
Yes, it is.
And my wife was an editor at a newspaper.
Okay.
Newspaper was a newspaper.
Yep.
So that meant he went in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and got home at 2 to 3 in the morning.
Oh, my goodness.
Because that's when the morning paper came out.
Yes.
You know, in those days. So when we first met, I would play, you know, about 80 to 120 times a year.
Wow.
I used to drive 60 to 80,000 miles a year.
Oh, my goodness.
But that's what you need to do.
Yes, I know. What's your instrument collection like these days?
I have 2 6-strings. I have my Martin, and then I have what my wife calls my midlife crisis guitar. I have a Taylor made out of the cola wood.
Okay.
And the reason I got that is I played in Taiwan with my friend Yang Wei. And I realized all of a sudden that if my guitar got damaged, I'd have nothing.
Yes.
And then so many places now want you to plug in.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, the Taylor, you know, electronic package.
Yeah, is set up for that.
Has really set up for that.
Yeah.
So I have an Allison long neck banjo, and then I have a Wildwood long neck banjo, which is what I travel around with a lot of times because I have 3 banjo classes at the Blackstone River Theater.
Okay.
Close to my home, and that's a lot of fun. I have an old Takamine 12-string.
Okay.
With Martin headstock.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And I have that set up lead belly style.
Okay, well, right on. What is lead belly style?
So the lead belly style would have the first 3 sets in unison instead of the first 2.
Okay.
And then the bass, and it's usually tuned, instead of being tuned down to D, it's actually tuned down to C sharp or C.
Wow.
So you really get that bass sound out.
Okay, all right.
Because he played a very heavy, thumb style.
Yeah, so it would be standard tuning tuned down to C sharp, or is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but then the first 3 sets in unison instead of the first 2.
Okay, all right. That's great.
So you really separate out that melody and the bass line.
Yeah.
He really played for a lot of dances in his time.
Okay, yeah, of course. And financially, you do okay? Do your recordings still bring in?
Yes, they do.
Good.
They do. Christmas time has its own flow.
Yeah.
And then, passing through an American sampler, and the others have their own sources.
Yeah. Yeah. Are they still being licensed out, your recordings?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it was funny. Youngway and I did this version of Home on the Range. So when Henry Kissinger went to China, the secret trip to China in 1978, they were going to have a state dinner. And it would have been an insult for there be no music of the country of your honored guest at that state dinner.
Okay.
Youngway's pipa teacher was then asked to learn something American to play at the state dinner to honor Henry Kissinger, because there was no U.S. music in China at this time.
Yeah.
And he learned Home on the Range.
Right on.
So it's a very melodic and thing. So we put it on the recording, and that got licensed to a couple of TV shows.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great.
You're sort of like, okay.
Do you teach?
Yes, I teach at the Blackstone River Theater. I have a couple of guitar classes and 3 banjo classes.
Okay. Do you have anything online where people can learn from you?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I spent so long recovering.
Sure. Yeah.
That I've never really explored that.
Yeah.
And then, where I like teaching my students, Kathy Fink has these amazing banjo lessons online.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there are players who are well beyond my ability who teach online who have stuff.
True. Well, that's true of all of us, but especially your music. I think people would really be drawn to it, and just learning the melodies that you've come up with.
Well, I've had a couple of people who've asked me for certain things, and we've zoomed in, and I do that.
Okay.
Or what's fun? I have this one class. This is my workshop class. And I have students who are taking these traditional tunes and making them their own.
Oh, right on.
So one of them took these tunes, variated them, and made them all Star Wars songs.
Oh, that's great.
He's a high school teacher. And he published a little book called Folk the Empire. And I'm having so much fun, and we talk about how do you approach this, and how do you, to get more, have you thought about this? And so those lessons are a lot of fun.
Sure. That's great. Well, I should probably let you go. I really appreciate your time. This has been fascinating for me. I'm not sure if you still have it for free, but
yes.
Okay. So
Inside Fezziwigs, anyone who wants it can go to my website and download it for free.
And your website is edsweeneymusic.com.
You're right. Or you can also go to edsweeney.com.
Okay.
I now have both names flowing in there. And I'm telling people, I've received so many notes, 36 years about that recording. And, they say imitation's the highest form of flattery. You will find Inside Fezziwigs underneath about 6 different titles of where 6 different companies have taken it, renamed it, and then put it out. And they always kept my name. Like one had it as A Victorian Christmas.
Sure.
Another one as Christmas Unplugged by Ed Sweeney. I didn't get a penny from it, but it was just sort of, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so it's taken a while to get stuff back to my name.
Yeah, I understand.
And do it gently. I don't like being adversarial.
Sure.
So, but Tracy and I were talking about it. It's something I did 36 years ago. I get these notes of people saying it's been part of their family Christmas for
Absolutely.
years and years. And so between now and the first of the year, whoever wants to download it, be my guest. Just come to my site and download it.
Right on. Well, thank you very much, Ed. I appreciate that. As on behalf of all my listeners, I appreciate it. And I just want to say, it is absolutely my favorite Christmas record. It captures the spirit of Christmas better than anything I've ever heard.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Thanks.
Of course. Well, thank you for your time, Ed. I wish you well. I hope I get to meet you in person at some point down the road.
That would be fun.
Yeah, it would be a blast for me.
Me as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And I hope you have a Merry Christmas.
You as well. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Have Guitar Will Travel. You can catch up on all the things I'm doing at thedeadlies.com. And I'm on all the social media platforms as well. And please support Vintage Guitar and all the wonderful things they do, because they do many, many wonderful things for us guitar players. Thanks. Please subscribe. Please tell a friend. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.